Hey folks, 7th here, and wanted to talk to you guys about something. I want to have a little talk about a video that ReviewTechUSA posted recently. A video where he implies that Microsoft was right about digital distribution and physical media. I really want to talk to him about this video. Very much so. To sum up what he said, he brought up the policies for the Xbox One that were pushed to the back burner after the negative response in regards to DRM and used games and borrowing games and trading games and all this wonderful stuff. He brings all that up. He implies that the concept of digital media is a dumb, pointless, outdated endeavor. And he cites a few examples here and there. One of the examples being The Division. You know, why do we need a physical copy of The Division when the game is an online multiplayer game that requires a constant internet connection and things of that nature? You know, why do we bother with having it on a disc when it has to install half the game on the hard drive anyway, etc., etc., etc. Maybe I can answer those questions for Review Tech. What do you think, Rich? Let's give it a try, shall we? Now, real quick disclaimer before we get started here. I have been saying for years that full digital media is an inevitability. It's coming, it's on its way, there's nothing we can do to stop it. It's a reality that eventually every gamer is going to have to put up with. It's coming. No one knows for sure when that's going to happen. Could be 2 gens from now, could be next gen. We don't know for sure, but it's coming. The minute that 250 megs per second becomes the average in the United States for internet download speeds, there you go. But I just wanted to give that as a disclaimer. I have been stating for years that this was on its way. You see this right here? This is Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 for the Vita. This game retailed when new for $39.99. It is now worth over $60. Why? I'll tell you why. Because for the digital version of this game, the license expired. So you can no longer buy it for any platform off the PSN. The only place you can get it is physical media. And that's just one example. There's a lot of games that didn't even have a physical option, that were digital only releases that lost their licensing, and so now you can't buy them. One of the most famous examples of that would be Scott Pilgrim vs. the World for PS3. You can't get it on Xbox 360 either because the license expired. There was the Outrun Online or whatever it was called that came out in 2007 or 8. That one you can't get on the PSN anymore because the license expired. Every time you turn around, there are games that just kind of magically vanish into the ether because the license doesn't get renewed. And so you can't buy it digitally anymore. Now, for right now, digital media means that like with Steam, you can purchase the game and download it to your hard drive. Right? Eventually, that's not what digital media is going to mean. Eventually, digital media is going to mean like PlayStation Now, streaming data. The whole game will be streamed. You won't have to worry about buying a newer upgraded console. You won't have to worry about buying a newer upgraded video card because all the video processing will be done over the cloud. And when that happens, you're either going to be paying essentially money for a license fee for each game, or you're going to have a service similar to PlayStation Now, similar to Netflix, where you're paying a monthly fee to have access to all the games in the library. But like Netflix, there's licensing fees for those games. You ever watched a movie on Netflix and thought, wow, I've got to tell my friends about this one. I've got to have them come over and watch this movie. So they all come over to watch it. You queue up Netflix. Uh-oh. The movie's not there anymore. That's because the licensing fee was not being paid. That's because they aren't licensing the movie to be on the service anymore, so it disappears. Same thing will happen with the games. That's something you don't have to worry about when you have physical media. Now, another thing he talked about was the hard drive. Talked about, what's the point in having physical media if half of it gets installed on the hard drive anyway? Well, whose fault is that? Is that the fault of the gamer that it's done that way? Is that the fault of the developer / publisher? Or is it the fault of the console makers? Here's a question I pose to you. Do you not realize that, technically speaking, a hard drive is physical media too? You're just taking data from one physical media and transferring it onto another physical media. It's just that hard drives run faster than optical drives. And that is why with game consoles you are transferring part of the data off the disk onto the hard drive because it runs faster. This is why PC gamers are obsessed with the RPM ratings on their hard drive, because the faster the RPMs are, the faster the data is loaded in. Why is this the case, though? This is the case because of the speed of the drives that are put in the consoles. PS4's Blu-ray player is a 6-speed drive. That is not, that's faster than what was in the PS3, but it's not that fast comparatively. You can get Blu-ray drives that run up to 16 speed. They have 16-speed Blu-ray drives. It may have faster than that now. It's the last time that I checked. But the last time I checked, you could get a 16-speed Blu-ray drive. Of course, it'd be a lot more expensive to put in the PS4, but the technology is there. Point being that, yes, games are more elaborate and bigger than they used to be, but that's only part of the equation. Part of the reason why much of the data has to be installed on the hard drive is because the companies are trying to get those consoles out as cheaply as possible, so they put these slower speed drives in there that the data can't be read off of it fast enough without causing really, really long load times and a lot of buffering. And of course, they also have the RAM limitations from having just 8 gigs of RAM and then being bottlenecked by the configurations that they have. So you couple that with having slower speed drives, and what you end up with is them having to offload a whole lot of the data onto the hard drive to be able to compensate, because they can read the data off the hard drive faster than it can the disk. That is not because of how great and big the games are. That's because of the design of the system, because of the cost-cutting measures they took to get that system in at under $500 or whatever price they felt was going to be too high of a price for someone to be willing to purchase that console. So that's not really the factor that he made it out to be. Let's talk about his example of The Division. He said he basically said The Division was a good example of why physical media is no longer needed, because it's an MMO with an always online connection. You've got to be connected all the time, so what's the point of even having it on a disc? Because eventually when the servers go down, that disc will be worthless. This is true. This is true of any game that was mandatory always online that has come out in the last several years. Mag, worthless. Warhawk, worthless. Any of these games that came out on a physical disc that the servers are no longer up, worthless. Now that doesn't happen as much with the PC community. You've got games going way back that are online only games that people still log in and play to this day. This is more of a console centric phenomenon, and that's because console gamers, they seem to be a little bit more focused with the next big thing than PC gamers do. I don't really know exactly why that is, but you can see it in the migration of gamers from one online property to the next. They'll be fascinated with one game for a few months, and then they move on to the next big shooter that comes out. And they do that with a lot of different genres. And so, you know, companies aren't going to look at a game that has been around for a while and only has, you know, an average 2,000 or 3,000 users a day logging into it, and keep up with the leasing costs of leasing servers to play those games. They're going to cut their losses and stop support of those games, and so then all you have left is what you can play on the disc. Well, it's a game like, and you know, this is the same stuff I was talking about with Street Fighter in my review of Street Fighter V. If all you've got on the disc is what you can play online, then you're fucked after those servers go down. So that part is basically true. However, you have to understand that what Rich said isn't true because that digital media is really outdated and obsolete and unneeded. It's true because the publishers and developers want it to be true, and so they design their games around that truth. It's true because Ubisoft wants it to be that way. The publishers and developers want the game to be that way. They wanted it to be online always. Why? Because it helps to get you mentally acclimated to the idea of digital distribution for your games. It helps get you used to always being online. It helps get you used to downloading your games instead of going out to a store and purchasing them. It gets you used to not being able to borrow a game from somebody or to go out and rent a game from like GameFly. It's all in an effort to get you accustomed to this digital future that's coming. It saves them on the manufacturing costs, even though they don't pass that savings on to you with the digital version. Hell, you can buy the used physical version cheaper after a few weeks, but it'll still be full price on digital, chances are, if the game is selling well. So it saves them on the manufacturing costs. It saves them on the shipping costs. They're not having to ship boxes of games out if they do it only digital. And again, they don't pass that savings on to you, the consumer, because they still charge the full price for the digital version. And it helps them to prevent piracy. The Division, like I said, requires a constant internet connection, whether you're playing it single player or not. And part of that is due to the fact that it's built into its DRM to prevent piracy. It's constantly checking and validating you the whole time that you're playing the game to make sure that you're you, to make sure that you're playing a valid licensed game, etc., etc., etc. Game didn't have to be designed that way at all. I can point to numerous examples. Here's a good example: Borderlands. You know, Division is an MMO shooter that you can play single player. Borderlands is a single player shooter RPG that allows you to play the whole game in online co-op. But if the internet connection is unplugged, you can still play the whole game single player and can play the whole game in two-player split screen without any problems. But with the Division, you unplug that Cat 5, you've got no game. None. Doesn't matter that it's installed on the hard drive. Doesn't matter that you got the disc. If you unplug that online, you're done. Now, what do you think is going to happen when everything goes to full streaming or everything goes to download and you lose your internet service? You forget you pay your bill. Some dipshit drives into the power pole outside and knocks the cable out. You still got your electricity, but you don't have your internet. Can't play the games because you can't get online. Can't download new games because you can't play online. Can't get online, can't do nothing. Digital media is just kick ass, isn't it? Gee, if only there was some way that I could play my game without being connected to the internet. If only there was such a thing. Another good example is Grand Theft Auto 5. You can play the whole game by yourself without being connected to the internet. Or you can play the online version. 10 years from now, you'll still be able to pop Grand Theft Auto 5 into your PS3 or PS4 and play it just like you did when you first brought it home. Not so with the Division. The bottom line is that digital distribution is really all about propping up the publishers and the developers. It's not about making anything better for the consumer. Now, I've seen people try to say that it's better because, hey, I can take my library with me anywhere I go. But the things that you have to give up to get that isn't worth it. Bottom line, is physical media here to stay? No. It's living on borrowed time. Is that really because there's any problems with physical media as a technology? No. It's because the companies, the developers, the publishers want it that way. It's because the console manufacturers are working with them to make that a reality. It's because it's already become so much of a reality on PC, because it gives them more control over what you play, how you play it, and how you get it, and whether or not you get to keep it. It's all about simplifying and taking away more options and taking away more control from the gamers as to what their gaming experience will be. That's all it is. It helps the developers, it helps the publishers, it helps the console manufacturers, and they toss you little things here and there to make it seem like they're doing it for your betterment. They're not. And it's disappointing to me to see someone I respect like ReviewTechUSA basically lay down and say, yes, I am excited about letting these corporations control what I play and how I play it. He basically just bent over and spread them wide to better allow for that digital deep dicking, and I just don't get it. Skibbity bop butt fuck me!